The chandelier-drenched ballroom of the Grand Regiment Hall smelled of expensive wax, starch, and the suffocating scent of unearned arrogance. For Maya, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. She adjusted the hem of her simple, charcoal-gray dress, a garment that cost more than her sister's monthly salary but looked, to the untrained eye, like something a librarian might wear to a quiet dinner. "You're doing it again." A sharp, clipped voice cut through the air. Maya didn't need to turn around to know it was Sarah. Captain Sarah Vance of the 4th Infantry, the golden child of the Vance bloodline, stood there in her full dress blues. Her medals clinked with a rhythmic, metallic authority as she approached, her spine so straight it looked painful. "Doing what, Sarah?" Maya asked quietly, her voice a stark contrast to the booming laughter of colonels and majors echoing off the marble walls. "Lurking. Looking like you're waiting for a bus instead of attending the most prestigious military gathering of the decade." Sarah stepped into Maya's personal space, her eyes scanning her younger sister with a mixture of pity and annoyance. She reached out and flicked a stray hair off Maya's shoulder as if it were a piece of shrapnel. "I told Mom it was a mistake to bring you. This isn't a university faculty lounge, Maya. People here have actually bled for their country." Maya felt the familiar sting, but she kept her expression neutral. It was a skill she had perfected in high-security briefings where showing emotion was a liability. "I'm here because I was invited, Sarah, just like everyone else." Sarah let out a short, dry laugh. "You were invited because the family package includes a +1 for the active duty officers. You're a charity case tonight. My charity case." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Look at these people. General Harrison is 3 tables away. The Secretary of Defense is expected within the hour. And here you are looking like this. You're an embarrassment to the uniform I'm wearing." "I don't wear a uniform, Sarah. I never claimed to," Maya replied, her gaze steady. "Exactly. You spent your life hiding behind computer screens and theoretical nonsense while I was leading patrols in the desert. You don't understand the weight of the medals on this chest. You haven't earned the right to stand in the center of this room." Sarah gestured toward a dimly lit corner near the service entrance, where a few auxiliary staff members were adjusting the floral arrangements. "Go sit at the back. Table 42. Stay out of the sight line of the photographers. When the speaker starts, just clap when everyone else claps and try not to look so civilian." Maya looked at the table her sister pointed to, a small, cramped spot hidden behind a large decorative pillar. It was effectively the exile table. "I have a seat assigned near the front, Sarah," Maya said, her voice remaining calm despite the heat rising in her chest. Sarah's eyes flared with genuine anger. "Don't lie to me. I checked the seating chart for the Vance family. You're listed as my guest, and I moved you. I told the coordinator there was a mistake and that my sister would be more comfortable in the back. I won't have you hovering over me while I'm trying to network with the Joint Chiefs. This night is the pinnacle of my career, and I won't have your mediocrity dimming my light." The cruelty was casual, practiced over years of sibling rivalry, where Sarah had always been the hammer and Maya the nail. To Sarah, Maya was just a consultant, a vague, boring job title that meant nothing in a world of rank, service numbers, and physical bravery. Sarah saw the world in shades of olive drab and desert camo. She had no concept of the digital wars being fought in the silence of the night, or the lines of code that acted as shields for the very soldiers she commanded. "Mediocrity?" Maya repeated the word softly, almost as if she were tasting it. "Go, Maya. Now." Sarah didn't wait for a response. She turned on her polished heel, the medals on her chest singing a song of self-importance as she marched toward a group of young lieutenants who looked at her with desperate idolization. Maya stood alone for a moment in the center of the foyer. She could see the security detail at the door, men in dark suits with earpieces. One of them, a man she had briefed just 48 hours ago in a SCIF, sensitive compartmented information facility, beneath the Pentagon, caught her eye. He started to nod in respect, but Maya gave a microscopic shake of her head. "Not yet." She took a deep breath, smoothed her charcoal dress, and began the long walk to the back of the room. She passed the VIP tables, past the silver service stations, and headed straight for Table 42, tucked behind the pillar in the shadows. As she sat down, the wooden chair creaking slightly, she watched Sarah laughing at a joke made by a brigadier general in the center of the room. Sarah looked like the embodiment of military success, shining, loud, and visible. Maya reached into her small clutch bag and felt the cold, heavy weight of the Distinguished Civilian Service Medal that she had been told to bring tonight. She didn't take it out. She didn't need to. She simply sat in the dark, a ghost in the machine, watching her sister celebrate a world that was about to be turned upside down by a single name spoken from the podium. The lights dimmed. The chatter faded. The master of ceremonies approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice boomed, "please welcome our keynote speaker, Admiral Nathan Miller." Maya leaned back in her shadow, her eyes fixed on the stage. The dismissal was complete. The humiliation was settled. Now all that was left was the truth. The silence that followed Admiral Miller's ascent to the podium was absolute. In the Grand Regiment Hall, silence wasn't just the absence of noise. It was a form of respect, a heavy, disciplined weight that only a man of his stature could command. From her exiled position at Table 42, Maya watched the back of her sister's head. Sarah was sitting in the third row, her posture so rigid she looked like a statue carved from granite. Sarah was leaning forward slightly, her eyes locked on the Admiral, radiating the desperate hunger of an officer hoping to be noticed by a legend. Admiral Miller didn't look like a hero out of a recruitment poster. He was older, with deep-set eyes that had seen the cost of every decision he had ever made. He adjusted his glasses and looked out over the sea of uniforms, the sea of medals, ribbons, and stars. "Tonight," Miller began, his voice gravelly but carrying to every corner of the room without the need for the microphone's help, "we celebrate the strength of our steel. We celebrate the courage of the men and women who stand on the front lines. Captains, majors, colonels. Many of you in this room have led charges that will be written about in history books." Maya saw Sarah's shoulders swell with pride. Her sister whispered something to the officer next to her, likely a comment about her own recent deployment. Sarah lived for this, the validation of the hierarchy, the public acknowledgement of the warrior class. "But," Miller continued, his tone shifting, turning colder and more serious, "valor alone is no longer enough to win a war. We live in an era where a single line of code is more devastating than 1,000 bayonets. We live in a world where our enemies don't just attack our borders. They attack our reality. They attack the very systems that keep our planes in the air and our encrypted comms silent." A murmur drifted through the crowd. This wasn't the usual rah-rah speech of victory and glory. This was a warning. From the shadows of the pillar, Maya felt the familiar hum of intellectual adrenaline. She looked at her hands. They were steady. Sarah had called them the hands of a librarian, someone who hid behind screens. But Maya knew those hands had spent the last 18 months dismantling a foreign botnet that had been inches away from shutting down the entire eastern seaboard's power grid. "Last month," Miller said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that commanded even more attention, "Operation Silver Spear was compromised. Most of you don't even know the name of that operation. That's because if it had failed, we wouldn't be here tonight. We would be in a state of national emergency." The tension in the room ratcheted up. Sarah was now gripped by the Admiral's words, her hand resting on the hilt of her ceremonial saber. She likely imagined she was the type of hero Miller was talking about, the one who would hold the line. "Our tactical units were blind," Miller said. "Our GPS was spoofed. Our drones were being hijacked in mid-air. For 6 hours, the United States military was digitally decapitated. We were prepared to take casualties in the thousands. We were prepared for a total blackout." He paused, looking down at his notes, then back at the audience. "The only reason I am standing here tonight, and the only reason your units came home safely, is because of a breakthrough. A breakthrough that didn't come from a lab in Arlington or a think tank in Silicon Valley. It came from a single individual who saw the attack coming before our most advanced AI even registered a flicker on the screen. Someone who worked 48 hours straight to build a digital firewall around our fleet while the rest of the world slept. Maya shifted in her creaky wooden chair. The shadows of the back row felt like a sanctuary, but also a cage. She could see Sarah nodding, probably thinking of some brilliant tech officer in her own battalion, or perhaps assuming the Admiral was about to praise a new weapon system she had used in the field. "We spend a lot of time talking about the tip of the spear," Miller said, his eyes scanning the room, moving past the front rows, past the generals, searching the dimness of the hall. "But tonight, I want to talk about the hand that sharpens it. We are joined tonight by a civilian, a woman who doesn't wear a uniform, who doesn't have a rank, and who has never asked for a salute." At the mention of the word civilian, Sarah's posture slumped just a fraction, a microscopic sign of dismissiveness. To Sarah, civilian was a synonym for vulnerable. She didn't even turn her head. She didn't think for a second that the Admiral's gaze was traveling toward the back of the room, toward the pillar, toward the sister she had just shoved into the darkness. "This person," Miller said, "is the reason your encrypted radios worked during the extraction. She is the reason the enemy's missiles stayed in their silos. She is, quite literally, the silent guardian of every soul in this room." Maya saw the Admiral's eyes lock onto hers. The recognition was like a physical blow. Beside her, a waiter frozen with a tray of champagne looked confused, following the Admiral's line of sight to the quiet woman in the charcoal dress. The Admiral reached for a small velvet box on the lectern. "The President has authorized me to present a non-classified citation for the highest level of civilian intelligence service. But more than that, I am here to say thank you on behalf of the Joint Chiefs." He took a breath. "Doutora Maya Vance, if you are in the room, would you please stand up?" The silence that followed wasn't disciplined anymore. It was a vacuum. It was the sound of 300 high-ranking officers holding their breath. Maya felt the air leave her lungs. She looked at the back of Sarah's head. She saw the moment her sister's neck stiffened. She saw the slow, agonizingly confused way Sarah began to turn around, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly agape, searching the shadows for the person the Admiral had just called a guardian. Maya stood up. The floorboards didn't creak this time. She stood in the dim light of Table 42, the exile table, and for the first time that night, the light of the chandeliers seemed to find her. The moment Maya stood up, the atmosphere in the Grand Regiment Hall underwent a violent chemical change. The oxygen seemed to vanish, replaced by a thick, buzzing electricity. At the front of the room, Sarah's face didn't just drop, it disintegrated. The mask of the disciplined, superior captain shattered into 1,000 shards of disbelief. She remained half-turned in her chair, her hands still white-knuckled on the table, staring at the back of the room as if she were seeing a ghost or a glitch in the universe. Maya stood perfectly still. The charcoal-gray dress, which Sarah had mocked as mediocre, caught the peripheral glow of the spotlights. She was no longer a shadow behind a pillar. She was the focal point of the most powerful room in the country. "Dr. Vance," Admiral Miller's voice boomed, warmer now, devoid of its earlier edge. "Don't be modest. Please, come forward. This room needs to see the face of the woman who kept the lights on when the world almost went dark." The invitation was a command. Maya began the long walk from the back of the hall. The path Sarah had forced her to take in shame was now a gauntlet of honor. As she moved, the sound started low at first, like the rumble of distant thunder. It began with the younger officers near the back, the ones who lived and breathed tech, and then it surged forward. Clap, clap, clap. By the time Maya reached the midpoint of the aisle, the sound was deafening. 300 of the nation's most decorated soldiers, men and women who had survived ambushes and led battalions, were standing up. They weren't just clapping. They were cheering. It was a rhythmic, disciplined ovation, the kind reserved for heroes returning from the brink. As Maya passed row 3, she didn't look for Sarah, but she felt her. She felt the heat of her sister's gaze, a mixture of horror and profound humiliation. Sarah was standing now, too, but her hands were frozen at her sides. She looked small. For the first time in their lives, the medals on Sarah's chest looked like toys compared to the weight of the moment Maya was stepping into. Maya reached the stage. Admiral Miller stepped down from the lectern to meet her, an unprecedented breach of protocol that made the room gasp. He didn't wait for her to bow or salute. He reached out and took her hand in both of his. "Doctor," he whispered, loud enough for the front-row microphones to catch. "The report I read on your work at 3 a.m. last Tuesday, it was the most brilliant piece of defensive logic I've seen in 40 years of service. You didn't just save a mission. You saved a generation of doctrine." He turned her toward the crowd. The applause doubled in volume. "Many of you," Miller addressed the room, "know the Vance name because of the captain's fine service in the infantry." He gestured vaguely toward Sarah's row, but his eyes never left Maya. "But history will remember this name because of the doctor. While we were playing checkers on the battlefield, she was playing grandmaster chess in the ether. She is the architect of our new Aegis. She is the reason our enemies are currently staring at blank screens while we celebrate in peace." The Admiral reached into the velvet box and pulled out the medal. It wasn't the standard bronze or silver. It was a gold-rimmed medallion on a deep purple ribbon, the Medal for Exceptional Civilian Service. As he draped it around Maya's neck, the weight of the gold felt like an anchor, grounding her in a reality she had kept secret for years. "Speech! Speech!" A voice called out from the back. It was a young lieutenant, his face flushed with excitement. Maya stepped up to the microphone. The room went so silent you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. She looked out at the sea of uniforms. She saw the generals she had briefed via encrypted video links, their faces now clear and full of respect. And then, she finally let her eyes settle on Sarah. Sarah looked as if she had been struck. Her face was pale, her eyes shimmering with a cocktail of embarrassment and a sudden, terrifying realization of how badly she had miscalculated. She was looking at the sister she had called a charity case. The woman she had tried to hide behind a pillar, now being hailed as the savior of the military establishment. Maya didn't use the moment to crush her. She didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for her. "I don't have a uniform," Maya said, her voice steady and echoing with a quiet authority that silenced any lingering doubt. "And I don't have a rank. But I have always believed that service isn't about what you wear or how loud you can command a room. It's about what you do when no one is watching, and what you protect when the world doesn't even know it's in danger." She paused, her gaze locked on Sarah's. "Tonight, I am honored to be among you, not as a guest, not as a plus one, but as a partner in the defense of everything we hold dear." As she stepped back, the Admiral led a final, thunderous cheer. Maya looked at the purple ribbon on her chest and then at the empty seat at table 42. The distance between the back of the room and the podium was only 60 feet, but it had taken a lifetime to cross. And as she looked at her sister's trembling lip, Maya knew that for Sarah, the world would never look the same again. The ovation eventually subsided into a low, buzzing hum of conversation, but the gravitational pull of the room had shifted entirely. As the formal ceremony transitioned into the gala reception, the social hierarchy Sarah had so carefully curated for herself collapsed. Maya was immediately surrounded by a wall of high-ranking officers. Generals, who usually moved through rooms like untouchable deities, were waiting in line to speak with her. Maya stood at the center of the whirlpool, calm and composed. She was no longer the mediocre civilian. She was the most important person in the building. Sarah, meanwhile, remained frozen by her seat in the third row. Her fellow officers, who had previously been laughing with her, were now looking at her with redirected curiosity and a hint of judgment. They had all heard her sharp-tongued dismissals of her sister earlier in the evening. They had seen her point Maya toward the back of the room. The silence from her peers was deafening. "Captain Vance?" a voice called out. Sarah snapped out of her trance. It was Major General Higgins, a man she had been trying to impress for 3 years. "Sir," Sarah said, instinctively straightening her spine. "That's your sister, isn't it?" Higgins asked, his eyes fixed on Maya. "I had no idea. Why didn't you mention she was the lead architect on the Aegis protocol? We've been trying to get a consultation with her department for 6 months, and they told us she was unavailable for mid-level briefings. And here you are, having Sunday dinners with her." Sarah's throat felt like it was filled with sand. I didn't realize the extent of her involvement, sir. She's very private. Private? She's a national asset, Higgins grunted, his eyes narrowing slightly as he noticed the distance between where Sarah stood and where Maya had been forced to sit. I noticed she was sitting at table 42 earlier. Strange place for a guest of honor, wouldn't you say? He didn't wait for an answer. He walked away, moving toward Maya with an outstretched hand and a respectful smile. The humiliation was a physical weight now. Sarah felt the heat of 100 eyes on her back. She saw the whispers. She saw the way people looked at Maya with awe and then at her with a newfound, pitying scrutiny. She had spent her whole life building a reputation as the successful Vance, the one who carried the family's honor. In 10 minutes, that reputation had been exposed as a hollow shell built on a fundamental misunderstanding of true power. Desperate to reclaim some shred of dignity, Sarah began to push through the crowd. She told herself she was going to congratulate her sister, but her true motive was damage control. She needed to be seen standing next to Maya. She needed to re-establish the sisterly bond she had just spent the last hour trying to sever. But as she neared the inner circle, she was stopped. Not by a wall of people, but by the Admiral's own security detail. "I'm her sister," Sarah snapped at the young MP blocking her path. "Captain Sarah Vance. Let me through." The MP didn't move. "I'm sorry, Captain. Dr. Vance is currently in a restricted briefing with the Admiral and the Secretary." She requested no interruptions. A restricted briefing? In the middle of a gala? Sarah's voice rose an octave. "I'm an officer. I have clearance level 6. With all due respect, ma'am," the MP said, his voice flat and professional. "Level 6 doesn't get you into this conversation. Please step back." Sarah recoiled as if she had been slapped. The restricted world she had always used as a badge of superiority was now a door being slammed in her face by her own sister's authority. Through a gap in the crowd, Sarah caught a glimpse of Maya. Maya was listening to the Secretary of Defense, her head tilted slightly, her expression one of quiet, intellectual dominance. She looked entirely at home. She didn't look like a librarian. She looked like a queen mother of a digital empire. Then, for a fleeting second, Maya's eyes drifted over the secretary's shoulder and found Sarah standing behind the security line. There was no malice in Maya's gaze. There was no "I told you so." There was only a profound, chilling clarity. It was the look of someone who had finally been seen for who they truly were, and in doing so had rendered their bully invisible. Maya didn't wave. She didn't acknowledge the captain's rank. She simply turned back to the secretary, continuing her conversation as if Sarah were just another face in a crowd of thousands. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow to the stomach. She hadn't just embarrassed herself. She had become irrelevant. The sister she had tried to hide was the only reason the room was still standing. The medals on Sarah's chest felt heavy, but for the first time, they felt like costume jewelry. As the elite of the military world leaned in to hear Maya's every word, Sarah Vance, the decorated captain of the 4th Infantry, stood alone in the middle of the ballroom, finally understanding what it felt like to be the one who didn't belong. The gala was winding down, the heavy scent of lilies and floor wax lingering in the cooling air of the Grand Regiment Hall. Most of the brass had departed for private after-parties or secured transport, but the atmosphere remained charged. Maya stood near the coat check, her movements slow and deliberate as she draped her simple coat over her shoulders, carefully concealing the purple ribbon and the gold medal that still felt strangely heavy against her collarbone. "Maya, wait!" The voice was ragged, stripped of its usual military cadence. Maya turned to see Sarah hurrying toward her. The captain's uniform was still perfect, but the woman inside it looked frayed. The arrogant mask Sarah had worn since childhood, the one that said she was the hunter and Maya the prey, had been scrubbed away, leaving behind something raw and desperate. Sarah stopped a few feet away, glancing nervously at a pair of colonels who were watching the exchange with undisguised interest. "Maya, I had no idea," Sarah began, her voice a forced whisper. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell the family? You let me believe you were just writing software for logistics." I didn't let you believe anything, Sarah, Maya said, her voice calm and level, devoid of the shaking timidity Sarah was used to. I told you I worked in national security. You were the one who decided that if I wasn't carrying a rifle, it didn't count as service. You made your own assumptions. Sarah flinched. She took a step closer, trying to lower her voice even further. Look, about table 42. I was just stressed. The protocol, the high-stakes environment. I was trying to protect you. I thought you'd be overwhelmed. Maya let a small, sad smile touch her lips. No, Sarah. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your ego. You couldn't handle the idea that I might occupy the same space as you. You needed me to be mediocre so that you could feel exceptional. That's not fair. Sarah's eyes flashed with a hint of her old fire, but it died out quickly when she realized Admiral Miller was standing just 20 feet away, waiting by the exit. Maya, listen to me. Tomorrow, the news of this is going to break. The family is going to be hounded. We need to present a united front. We should go to brunch tomorrow, just us, the Vance sisters. We can talk about how we've both been serving the country in our own ways. It would look great for my promotion board to show how integrated our work is. The silence that followed was long and cold. Maya looked at her sister, really looked at her, and saw the machinery of Sarah's mind still trying to calculate the tactical advantage of a sibling she had despised an hour ago. There is no united front, Sarah, Maya said firmly, because for 20 years, you've treated our relationship like a battlefield. You didn't want a sister, you wanted a subordinate. And tonight, you didn't even want a guest. You wanted a ghost. Maya adjusted her coat, the gold of the medal catching the light one last time. I won't be at brunch tomorrow, Maya continued. I'm flying to Brussels at dawn for a NATO summit. And as for your promotion board, I won't sabotage you, but I won't help you either. From now on, you'll have to stand on your own merits, not on the shadow you try to cast over mine. Sarah stood paralyzed, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for a retort, a command, or a plea that would work. But the hierarchy had been permanently inverted. She was a captain. Maya was an architect of the world Sarah lived in. One more thing, Maya said, turning back for a final word. The Admiral asked me if I wanted to be assigned a permanent military liaison for my department. Someone to handle the bridge between the digital and tactical units. For a split second, a flicker of hope ignited in Sarah's eyes. A dream of a high-level posting. Working alongside the sister she now realized was a titan. I told him no, Maya said softly. I told him I prefer to work with people who understand that courage doesn't always come with a rank. Maya turned and walked toward the exit. Admiral Miller opened the door for her, nodding with a level of deference he had never shown anyone in Sarah's unit. Maya stepped out into the crisp night air, leaving the Grand Regiment Hall behind. Sarah Vance remained in the center of the foyer, surrounded by the echoes of a party that was over. She looked down at her own medals, then up at the empty space where her sister had stood. For the first time in her life, the captain realized that while she had been busy winning the skirmishes of their childhood, Maya had already won the war. The door clicked shut, and the silence of the hall was final.